Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live with Rabbi Chaim Coffman, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Always a joy to have him share in depth the ethics of the Fathers with us. And hopefully today we're going to finish off chapter 2, Mishna 9, and maybe a bit more if Rabbi's got time. So let's not waste any time and jump right into it and see how the Rabbi's doing. Shalom, Rabbi. How are you doing today? And we're going to turn the class over to you. So good to be with you as always, and thank you for all you share.
It's always a pleasure. Good to get back into some ethics this week. Coming Shabbat is going to be a new month. New month of El. El is the month before Rosh Hashanah, right? So a lot of introspection. Certainly a lot of introspection that, you got the whole month, right? You got the whole month of El, you got Rosh Hashanah, you got Yom Kippur, 10 days of repentance in between, you got 40 days, right? 40 days. So ethics is always good. That's, good for the entire month. It's good every day, right? But, there are special times, right? There are definitely special times when introspection, is good, which actually is a good segue to the last part of this Mishna. We are in Pirkei Avos, chapter 2, Mishna 11. This is part 11, and this is probably where it's going to end. Going to finish this Mishna. Next Mishna is actually relatively short, but again, see where everything goes. The last part of the Mishna says, we spoke last number of weeks about Rabbi Shimon ben Nasana, talking about 5 great students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right? So here, we spoke about fear of sin, right? Which everyone agrees, fear of God, fear of sin, right, is crucial. It's absolutely crucial. But fear of God doesn't necessarily need to love of God, right? It doesn't necessarily go there. Love of God will lead you to fear of God. You need the base, right? You absolutely need the base. So the lowest level of fear of God, we said, is, I'm not going to do this or that because I'm afraid I'm going to fry in hell forever, right? That's the lowest level. What's the highest level? Highest level is understanding God's greatness, how God runs the world. There's a story last week. I think we read this story by the Chazon Ish, Rav Avram Yeshaya Karo, with a blessed memory, who looked a little bit at the structure of a flower. By looking at the structure of a flower, he almost fainted. Right? Totally almost fainted because of, understanding, seeing God's greatness. So the last part of the Mishnah says, in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, the Mishnah says, is like a spring flowing stronger and stronger. Now, obvious question would be, okay, very good. So what does that mean? What does it mean over here? One explanation is that he had an open heart, and he had such an open heart, it allowed him to think deeply into things, come up with different ideas from his own knowledge and not from others. Now, this is a loaded statement here. First of all, it says he had an open heart. Now, an open heart, you might think, well, we always mention someone has their mind open till their brains fall on the floor, right? So being open-minded, not necessarily such a good thing, right? But a person has an open heart, it means they overflow with wanting to do, acts of loving kindness, helping others. An open heart can let you, go according to your heart's desires also. In other words, your heart's so open that you just do whatever you do. You don't have any moral anchor, right? So having an open heart may not necessarily be a good thing. But what's he saying over here? What are we saying over here? That having an open heart allows the person, or allows Rabbi Elazar ben Arach over here, what did it allow him to do? To think deep. To look at things in many different ways. Come up with different ideas from his own knowledge and not from others. Now, why is this something that is praiseworthy? Right? That's the question. Why is this praiseworthy? First of all, first thing you might say, well, isn't it true? If I learn with someone else, and anyone's ever, been inside yeshiva and how, yeshiva guys learn, you learn with a partner. You learn with a study partner. You bounce ideas off. When you bounce ideas off, you have to have humility. You definitely have to have humility because maybe your idea is wrong. And maybe a person's going to, stand fast to their idea to show the other person's wrong. Well, that's forbidden. Right? You want to get to the truth. So you have to have humility over here. So you learn more, no question, when you learn with someone else. Now, if someone's on a very high spiritual level, they don't necessarily have to learn with someone else. Even though most people would agree it's better, right? No question, it's better. You bounce ideas off of someone else. Remember, we look at something in a certain way because of the way we grow up, our world outlook, many things. There are many things where we'll look at something in the way we think. Now, the way we think may not necessarily be the right way to look at it. Meaning, someone's going to come along and say, okay, you think like this, and commentaries say like this, and you want to come to this conclusion, but who says that's right? Who says that understanding, we take it that far? Maybe we don't take it that far, right? Maybe there are other, commentators, whatever, that disagree. So if they disagree, what's going on here? Right? What's going on? It means that you got to rethink. Why do you think what you do? Why do you think it's right? What proof do you bring to the table, so to speak? So learning with someone, everyone would agree, is probably better. Is definitely better. Because, as we say, two heads are better than one. But when you're delving into something, especially in spiritual terms, we have certain biases. We all have certain biases. How we look at the world. We're wired differently. Nobody's wired the same. Some people have more knowledge. Some people have less knowledge. Some people have the ability, to be very good at detail, and dissecting what someone says or what they don't say. Right? Others may look at it and extrapolate what the person says, what the rabbi says, let's say, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Right? I've had many times people say, but you said this. Okay, you're right. So let's say I said X. Question is, what did that mean? It doesn't mean the same thing for two different people. Right? People get caught up in this idea. You ask a question, same question, two people ask to one rabbi, get two different answers, maybe three different answers. Right? You're going to say, but isn't the answer the same? Listen, if something's black and white and you can't get around it, the answer should be the same. If it's something where, okay, it's going to depend where the person's holding, what they've gone through, other things, right, which, much bigger topics here, then that's something else, right? So what's going on over here? So it means one aspect of this is he had an open heart that allowed him to think deeply into things and to come up with different ideas from his own knowledge. Now, what does that mean? So essentially what it means is, person, let's say they're sitting and learning, and, someone told me this recently, what do I need rabbis for? I learn on my own. Yeah, but if you learn on your own, what happens when you get stuck? So he say, I go to Rabbi Dr. Google. Great. So some people ask me questions when Rabbi Dr. Google doesn't have an answer. But there are many things that are not black and white. So therefore, you need advice. But someone coming from the outside, and I always think it's just an unbelievable thing. That someone who comes from the outside, some people have an attitude. Especially Noahites. No offense to any Noahites out there. They have an attitude. Right? Even, secular Jews have an attitude, religious Jews have an attitude. Why do I say they have an attitude? I say they have an attitude because they're on the outside looking in. Just like secular Jews. And they do what they do, they say what they say based on an article I read in Wikipedia. Based on something that's not lasting. So they come and they, I'll see people who will put up a class or whatever, Noahites or super Noahites, whatever you want to call them, and they're quoting Kabbalah. I mean, I'm not really going to take that so seriously because you have to be holding somewhere in the world and have a certain level of knowledge. I don't care, if the Talmud's written in English and it's gone through, a number of things in English, big deal. Can't learn Talmud or any of these things without a teacher. That's clear. That 100% should be clear. So, we always say you can't run before you learn how to walk. You can't walk till you learn how to crawl. You can't study calculus without algebra or trigonometry. Meaning, you can't go beyond what you're not ready for. So here's an interesting idea. The idea is he came up with this knowledge or different ideas, let's say better, came up with different ideas on whatever topic based on his own knowledge. Now, what's the $1.5 million question? How do I know this is good? How do I know his own, based on his own knowledge? Now, let's say he knows a lot. Could very well know a lot. Right? Could know things. Let's say, he's got an, encyclopedia for a head. So he remembers a lot of things. Right? Which you're going to see actually in the next Mishna. I don't know if we'll see how far we get. Right? What is better? Right? Memorizing, having encyclopedic knowledge, or understanding things the way they should be. Meaning that either the sharpness of a person is a better character trait, in other words, how to analyze, or is memorization. Maybe memorization when a person knows what they remember, maybe that's better. Maybe that's better over here. But what's the point? I don't want to get lost in my own parable here, right? What's the point that we say a person comes up with different ideas from his own knowledge? Now, by a person's own knowledge, we've made clear before, a person's own knowledge, they're biased. They have absolute biases, right? Someone tried to rip me to shreds 2 weeks ago after I did my video on Tanakh Talk about the Karaites, right? And I'll just flush this out there for a second because I mentioned it Friday as well, or Thursday night for most people. And that is what the person's saying. The person says, you're giving it over, an overgeneralization about Karaites. Why don't you bring a Karaite expert? Well, and then someone else is complaining that they have their biases. They have an Orthodox bent and all this. Okay, we have biases. We're not saying not. We're not saying we're open-minded until our brains fall on the floor. We're not saying that. Does he bring on a show with Rabbi Singer someone to debate him? No. We'll let people ask questions, different things. But is he going to give the time of day to someone on their soapbox when we know what they say is drivel? When we know what they say is not true? Why would we do that? Why in the world? Oh, but you got to be open-minded. I don't have to be open-minded. Ask a Democrat. Are they open-minded? No. They're not open-minded. They'll talk over you. See, I don't know if they can scream over me. They'll talk over you. They won't answer. They'll just give over their own thing, but they're not going to listen. They're not interested in listening. Why not? Because they say they have agenda. They have an agenda, right? You get these ultimate leftists, and they'll go on to college campuses, and saying, Israel, occupied territory, and all these things. They won't, them and others, someone comes, pro-Israel to speak, they won't even let them speak. They'll barricade the doors, they won't let them in. So where's the open-mindedness from the left? They're going to claim to be open-minded? Of course. They're going to claim to be open-minded. No question about it. We'll let you say what you have to say, maybe. But they won't let you get a word in edgewise. They're going to tell you why you're wrong, why it's stupid, why it's backwards, why it's this, why it's that. They're not going to listen. I got proof. Right? I got major proof. You want to hear it? No. Because we believe it's backwards. Okay, you have an agenda. We mentioned many times. You have in the Haggadah, right? You have the Haggadah we read on Passover. So what does the Haggadah say? There are 4 sons. The wise son, an evil son, a wicked son, right? One doesn't know how to ask, and a simple son. Now, the wise son and the evil son both ask the same type of question. The wise son, you give him an answer. The evil son, you don't give him an answer. You blunt his teeth, and you say, had he been there, he would have been redeemed. Why don't you give him an answer? Why at least not try and bring him closer? At least he's at the Seder, right? The joke is, and it's a bad joke, there are 4 sons, right, that the Haggadah, the Passover Haggadah speaks about. We mentioned a wise son, a wicked son, one who doesn't know how to ask, and a simple son. But there's a 5th son. We say tongue-in-cheek. Who's the 5th son? You know who the 5th son is? The one who doesn't come to the Seder. He's the 5th son. But there's wicked son. At least he came to the Seder. And he's asking the question. Yeah, let's look at the question. The question for the wicked son, even though it's similar to the wise son, why is the wicked son? You don't answer him because it's not a question. It's an agenda. When someone's got an agenda, you don't answer them. There's no point to answer them because you're answering an answer. I don't have, there's no point to answer an answer. Someone asks a question, okay? Then you have to see where they're coming from. You have to see if, someone will say, where was God during the Holocaust? Why did God kill 6 million Jews? Well, it takes a lot of people to kill 6 million Jews. 6 million Jews. You have the Germans, you have the Latvians, you have the Ukrainians, you have the Russians, you have the Poles, you have the Hungarians, right? So that's not the question, right? The question is, okay, where was man? But you know what? I have a great book. I have a great book for you to read. It's called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. You want to read it? No, it's just a question I ask rabbis to make them fidget. Great. So that person's not interested in an answer. Right now, most people probably not exactly that hostile. But I say, listen, there's information. I give you information to read about. Some will look at it, some won't. But today, a lot of people will say, oh, it's propaganda. You're trying to brainwash me. Okay, you want to look at the information? Fine. You don't want to look at the information? That's your choice. Right? But you have to see how they're asking the question. So comes along the evil son. He's not asking the question. He's got an agenda. So you blunt his teeth. Why do you blunt his teeth? Because the more you're going to try and answer, the more he's going to give you flack. Right? Just like King Solomon says in Proverbs. King Solomon says, you hang out with a lates, someone who's a scoffer, someone who's a mocker, what's going to happen? You're going to become the same. You're not going to have influence on him, just the opposite. He's going to turn you into someone like him. So therefore, you don't give him a pedestal here. You don't answer him. You just blunt his teeth. You don't try. Blunt his teeth, you just throw out an answer and you move on. Blunt his teeth really means you don't give him an answer. You're not giving him an answer. Somebody says, for example, circumcision is barbaric. Now, that's not a question, right? That's a statement. I don't have to answer that. But I've been dying to give this answer. I've never been, never had anyone say that. But if anyone would say it, and they say circumcision is barbaric, what's your answer? You don't have to give an answer, but what would you say? Barbarians don't do it. It's an easy answer, right? That's blunting their teeth. They're not asking a question, right? Someone said to me, family member, one said to me that if I breathe on your kosher food doesn't mean it's not kosher. So you know what my answer was? No, it's kosher. It just has bad breath on it. Am I giving them an answer? No, I'm pushing them off. You push them off. You don't give an answer because they're not interested in an answer. If they would say, gee, I think, Judaism discriminates, against women. What do you think about that? That's a question. Or I think, God doesn't exist because of the Holocaust. Why did this happen? That's a question. But when someone says there's no difference, let's say a feminist, ultimate big time feminist is going to say there's no difference between men and women. What's the answer to that? You say, oh. And I think there's no difference between men and women. Oh. Why do you keep saying no? Because you're not asking me a question. But if you say, I don't think there's any difference between men and women, what would your opinion be? If someone were to say that, that's a question. So then you give them an answer that, hopefully they can hear. But if they're not asking a question, then you just throw anything to them. They're not interested in an answer. No matter, I think, whatever. 2 and 2 is 5. Okay. I like bluefish. Fine, I like greenfish. Right? There's no answer. They're giving you an agenda. So if they have an agenda, which a lot of people do, then you don't have to answer. So blunting their teeth means I don't give them an answer. I just push them off. Because even though it's interesting, even though if you look at the Haggadah, they ask similar questions. The wise son and the evil son. The wise son, you give him an answer. You say you can't eat after the Paschal offering. Right? You don't eat after the Afikomen. But to the wicked son, you don't do that. You don't give him an answer. You blunt his teeth. Again, there's a difference. There's a difference. And most people could probably tell, how the question's asked and what the question is. Why they're asking the question. Because if a question comes back and it's a legitimate question, let's say, it's a legitimate question. So if you have an answer, good. If you don't have an answer, listen, it's a good question. I'll get back to you. If you just admit you don't know. There's nothing wrong with that. You say, I'll find an answer. Call someone up, I'll get an answer. It's a good question. But if someone's not asking a question, and they're just asking to get under your skin, a Holocaust question, maybe just to get under your skin in a certain way. Well, I don't think God exists. How can you believe in God? Look at all these terrible things that happen. Now, that might not be getting under your skin. They'll say, grandparents, great-grandparents, look what happened over here. They got destroyed. How could there be a God in the world? Legitimate question. Legitimate question if that's what they're asking. If they're asking a question or they're making a statement. I had someone like this. I had someone, tell me their son, even though it's not really their son because they're intermarried, their wife isn't Jewish, so their son technically, spiritually speaking, it's not their son, right? So they say, my son, got married, married this girl who's also not Jewish, so that's good. They're both not Jewish, very good. And they didn't even mention God at the ceremony. Now think about what the person's saying. Look who they're talking to. They're talking to someone who obviously believes in God. Someone obviously who changed their life because of their belief in God. So what do they say? What do they say? Maybe to get under the person's skin, meaning me. Do they say they didn't even mention God at the ceremony? Now, what could I have said? I could have said very easily, both are non-Jews. They don't need to mention God. They can live together. They don't need any marriage ceremony. Not from anybody. They don't need a marriage ceremony. They're Noahites. Not a problem. Right? That wouldn't be an issue. But for, how long it would take me to explain what a Noahide is, how it works, what's considered marriage and divorce. I wouldn't even, I'd have like 5 seconds to get the information out. So, what my answer was? My answer was, okay. Did I get rattled? No. Why should I get rattled? They're talking about 2 non-Jews, right? In my book, not in their book, per se, right? At least one of them for sure not Jewish, but it doesn't matter how you look at it. It's irrelevant how you look at it. So the person's trying to rattle me a little bit and say, see, they didn't mention God. Okay. That was my answer. What am I going to answer? Person has, people like that have the time span, like a doorknob, for me to give information. Same person, just be on this. Same person, said, well, can you give me the short version about life after death? Because I know if 10 seconds in, they say, okay, give me the shorter version. Give me the short version. You want to take one of the fundamental principle of Judaism, i.e., where the soul goes and everything else and reward and punishment, blah, blah, blah. You want to explain it in 5 seconds? 10 seconds, I'll tell you what my answer was. My answer was, I'll send you a link to a video. You want to watch it? Fine. I'll send you a link. That was it, 3 seconds. Because I know that's about how much time I had. So now, people like that will say they're much more intellectually honest. They're more open. That's how we got into this whole thing. They're much more open-minded than me. Well, that might be true. We never claim to be open-minded over here. That's not the purpose of what we do. We're interested in truth. in an absolute truth. So I could say, I believe in this, and I have proof. You want to hear it? And that person will say, no, not interested. Save your propaganda for your students. That's what they'll say. Not interested. So who's closed-minded here? Who's really closed-minded? Yeah, we also have an agenda. But if someone asks a question, they deserve an answer. If someone asks a question, it's not really a question, it's a statement, then the answer is, oh, or okay. They're not asking anything. What's behind the statement is you don't have an answer for me. I'm not interested in an answer. So the wise son, you don't give him an answer. You push him off. That's what it means to blunt his teeth. You push him off. He doesn't deserve an answer. Because when you give an answer, he's going to make fun more. Right? And there are times that I know someone will ask, let's say, why are you not allowed to wear wool and linen together? Right? For a Jew. It doesn't apply to a non-Jew. Torah says not allowed to wear shatnez. Shatnez means wool and linen. Can't wear wool and linen together. So if I have a sweater that says 100% wool, I have to get it checked. I have to go to someone who's an expert, knows how to check, see if there's linen. Right? So I had a relative once gave, a bunch of sweaters to my kids. So I said, it's great. I looked at it, it says wool. I said, okay, get it checked. Probably not a problem. Maybe it should be a problem. But I went over to get them checked first. So I said, why? So I told him there's a verse in the Torah that says you're not allowed to wear wool and linen. So I got to make sure there's no wool and linen. The person said, why? So I said, it's a good question. Not really sure. It's a decree. It's one of these things that's not logical, but it's a decree, just like the red heifer. It's a decree. Keeping kosher is a decree. Right? You can't cook a calf in its mother's milk. It's a decree. The laws of kashrus, what animals you can't eat. Many things are a decree. So the person came back and said, but if you can't give me a reason, why would I keep it? So you know what Coffman's smart alecky answer was? Coffman's answer wasn't, if I would give you an answer, you would keep it? Right? What's the reason? Well, it has to make sense. Of course it has to make sense. I said, I could give you 10 reasons you're not going to listen. You give me an excuse why I don't have to keep it. That was the end of that conversation. Because they're not interested in truth. They just want an excuse why they don't have to do it. And you're going to say, wow, there's a mitzvah. There's a mother bird hovering over a chick. You push away the mother bird. You take the eggs. Sorry, there were eggs. They haven't hatched yet. Right at a certain point, you push away the mother bird, you take the eggs. You know what the Torah says? If you do the mitzvah, you get long life. There are only two mitzvahs that say you get long life in this, not in this world, in the next world. What do you get? What's the other mitzvah? Sorry. What's the other mitzvah? You know what the other mitzvah is? Keep it up aim, honoring parents. The only two mitzvahs that you get long life in the next world. But what's someone going to say by Shuach HaKain? What's the obvious question? That's cruel. Tsar Rabbi Chaim, causing cruelty to animals. Even non-Jews are liable. Just spoke about that last week from No-Eyed Nations. Even by non-Jews, right? They're not allowed to be cruel to animals. So how are you allowed to push away the mother bird and take the eggs? So what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says anyone says it's cruel is a heretic. What do you mean a heretic? How can you be a heretic over here? Why in the world should you be a heretic over here? Because it's a decree. It's no different than the laws of kashrus. No different than the red heifer. No different than shatnez. All these mitzvahs that we do are divine decrees. They're decrees. Now you can tell me, don't steal. That makes more sense. Don't kidnap, one of the 10 commandments. Use the language don't steal, but it means don't kidnap. I can understand that makes sense. Don't murder, I can understand makes sense. But guess what? As we spoke against the Karaites, it's a law book, no definition. Right? So you kill somebody by accident, self-defense. Are you liable? You'll say, well, that's different, self-defense. How do you know? It says don't murder. Don't kill. Right? If it says don't murder, who says it's premeditated? If someone comes at you and you end up killing them, you had no choice. Is that premeditated? No. But is that murder? It's murder. Euthanasia. Is that murder? No, that's putting grandpa out of his misery or out of our misery. Put him in a hospital, let him die. That's different. Why? Why is that different? That's murder. In stealing, Someone stole from a very rich person. They're not going to miss the money anyway. Is that stealing? No, you have to understand. They were starving. They had no food. They come under tough times, blah, blah, blah. All these different things. Again, bottom line, is that stealing? What do I care what they're going through? If they come into a law court, they guilty? Oh, they're guilty. A non-Jew, if they steal even the most minutest amounts, I don't even know if that's a word, the smallest amounts, they're liable. Right? And they'll be liable for death penalty here because they stole. What do I care what he did? What do I care what's behind what's going on in his life? You think anybody cares? Nobody cares. Nobody's interested. He's going to go in front of a law court. He's going to go through front of the Sanhedrin. Finished. They're going to say guilty. I say, no, you got to understand. What do we have to understand? Did you steal? Did you steal? But the person's not going to miss the money. So what? Guilty or not guilty? Bottom line, guilty. So what are we making up? Our own definitions? Karaites going to have to make up their own oral law based on the way they see it. So everything basically is a decree. Some things make a little more sense. Some things make no sense at all. 80% probably of the Torah more doesn't make logical sense. That's why non-Jews don't have to keep things that don't make logical sense, according to the Torah. Right? So that being said, if the Torah is true, we'll go on that assumption. If the Torah is true, I have to keep it. I have to do what it says. But someone's going to come up with an agenda. I don't like this. This doesn't fit my world outlook. Well, you know what? Too bad. That's the way it is. And people do what they want. That's not Torah anymore. People make it up as they go. I think we're going to do this. And we're going to make it up like this. That's what the Reform movement does. Conservative movement does. Progressive, Reconstructionist, whatever you want to call them. They make it up as they go along. It fits in. It doesn't fit in. Times change. Right? How many times we have heard that ad nauseum? Times change. Right? Come on, the laws of modesty. Times change. So we're not that open-minded because we believe there's a right way, there's a wrong way. Right? Just said that earlier, part of the evening service. Right? Of the Shema, second paragraph of the Shema. Second paragraph of the Shema says you go in the right way, God's going to help you. You go in the wrong way, God's not going to stop you. Right? But there's reward and punishment. That's the point. There's reward and punishment. So people say all the time, come on, you think your way is right. Well, show me it's wrong. Show me proof that it's wrong. And they'll say, but you think God's going to punish? You think God's going to do? Yeah, I do. Because that's what the Torah tells me. And if God spoke at Mount Sinai, and we understand whatever that speaking was, he passed it down to Moses. And Moses passed it down to us, one of the 13 principles. And it's never changed. If it's never changed, then yeah, we're going through 3,500 years of Jewish history. That hasn't changed in the last 250 years, right? So 250 years and back, you had other groups. And more or less, up until 250 years ago, most people were Orthodox. That's the way it was. Now, someone tried to rip me to shreds and say, see, you're just looking over the fact there were other groups, right? They're the Pharisees, they're the Sadducees, right? You had the Essenes, you had other groups, even at the time of the Second Temple, and that's one of the prayers, the paragraphs we say in the Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, right? The God should wipe them out, God should take care of them, all this. So very good. So these groups existed. So they say, see, you overlooked that. I didn't overlook it. I didn't mention it. Why didn't I mention it? Because where are the Essenes today? Where are the Karaites today? 50,000 of them. Where are they? They're making so much noise in the world. What are they doing for the world? Nothing. When's the last time you heard, a huge funeral for one of the great Karaite rabbis of the last generation? You don't hear anything. You're going to say they like to be quiet. They like to be not in the limelight. Yeah, because they don't exist. That's why. They don't exist. So why would it, okay, so people bring it up. You get all these Karaites, blah, blah, blah. They're alive and well, really. Someone brought a proof from a scholarly book. I'm just going to mention this because I spoke about it the other day, right? That's just so how skewed this is. They bring a proof in the year 1100, right? At the time of Rashi, the Rambam, the Ramban, right? In 1100, there was a rabbinic student, an Orthodox Jew, who married a Karaite. Now the question is who they go like. They go like Rabbinic Judaism or they go like Karaites. I don't know. Right? It doesn't say. But the person said, see, we got proof. Even they married each other. Call that an intermarriage. They married each other. Yeah. Okay, you got one example. If you told me I had 1,000 examples, I had 10,000 examples where Rabbinic Jews married with Karaites, okay, you got a claim. You have a claim. You can't just say, 1,000 marriages or 10,000 marriages, something to sneeze at. Okay? Right? Way back when, the numbers were greater. True. But they diminished to the extent they really don't exist. But what's the point? So the person brings me this as a proof. And they say, see, Karaites are alive and well. You brought me one example. You brought me one example of a Rabbinic Jew who marries a Karaite. Now, I would have asked the question further. My question would have been, so what happened to them? What happened to their kids? Did they, let's say they had kids. Were they Rabbinic Jews? Or were they Karaite Jews? But you would think throughout the millennium that if that's true, and, and they have a population, a big population, where are they? What happened in the last 1,100 years? So you would think, okay, so, I saw one quote there, 30,000 Karaites. So another quote there, 50,000, right? 50,000, let's say. Boy, that's not so big. That's not so big. So you're going to say, okay, there are 14.5 million Jews, 10% are Orthodox, at some level. They keep Shabbos and they keep kosher, right? 10%, okay? The other ones, why don't they keep what they keep? Because they don't know. They don't know. So, in order to question, there are other groups, and yeah, there are different things that took them out of being an Orthodox Jew. Rabbi Chanan, Shem Yikam Damo, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Hashem should avenge his blood, famous students of the Chofetz Chaim, right? He writes in his book, Epic of the Messiah, right? In the coming of the Messiah, and he says, what's ruined Judaism over the last 100 years, more than 100 years? What ruined Judaism? So he said a lot of things took Jews away. Socialism, communism, democracy. There wasn't, they wanted to run away from Europe because they were getting killed and massacred, right? That was one thing. But they were leaving in droves, based on secular things they read and different things and whatever. That's what destroyed Judaism over the last 150 years, 200 years. Right? All these isms, communism, socialism, democracy. You see what goes on in America today. Right? 2 generations, 3 generations, wiped out spiritually. Spiritually, gonzo. Why? Because they're not educated. Parents gave them barely an education. That's it. Barely a Jewish education. They didn't want to suffer like they suffered. Right? So they gave them everything material. Now forget about Judaism. Throw your tefillin overboard. Why are we going to pray, do this, do that? It's not a good thing to be a Jew. So they gave it up for nothing. They threw their Judaism in the garbage. That's what they did. It's not based on knowledge. Because you know what they say? The smarter they are, the stupider they are. Right? The harder they fall. Because people can make up all kinds of things. The person can have a PhD, which is pilot higher and deeper, or Papa has dough. Right? Whatever you want to call a PhD. So, yeah, really, really intelligent. Really, really intelligent. And their Jewish knowledge is like 0. They have like a 2nd grade education, if that. They have no education. If they have no education, and they start spewing all kinds of things, right? I'm going to sit there and listen. The example we always give, imagine Stephen Hawking were alive today, right? You read a Wikipedia article, about the expanding universe. You're going to say, no, it's not. You give different proof, and you're going to tell the greatest physicist of this day. You're going to tell him that, all his findings are wrong because you read one article on Wikipedia. You really think he's going to take you seriously? Right, I'll give another example, more current example. There's a book out there explaining age of the universe. Explaining age of the universe and creation. Right? It's a book I know that Dan has, and that is Genesis and the Big Bang. right? Written by Dr. Schroeder. So I took him once to speak in Tel Aviv University, speak to English-speaking university students there, and he's a physicist, so it's not like he's coming out of like physics, high school physics, whatever. He's a big-time physicist. I mean, I'm not gonna say everyone agrees with what he says, whatever it is, doesn't matter. What was the point? He told me point blank. He said, I'm going to explain, I've done this so many times over the years. Does it for Discovery program in Asia Torah. He's spoken all over the world. And he says that when I give over information about physics, even before I get to Genesis, he says before, once I give over a little bit of information in physics, I've lost everybody. He said, I totally lost everybody because they're not holding by the physics, but they have a claim, right? Which a lot of people throw out there. What do you do with the age of the universe? Right? I think I spoke about that once on Tanakh Talk. What do you do with that? People throw it out as a block. It's not comparable with the Torah's version, right? Not the same, because they're going to claim that the world's 15 billion years old or more, and Genesis says 6 days. Okay, so you have to look. As Dr. Schroeder will say, it's 6 days plus. So what's the status of a day? Right? So one of his answers is, depends where you're standing. In the universe. If you're standing in a place where 1 day could be 1,000 years, or, 1 billion years, that's a different issue. Depends where you're standing in the universe. Right? One possible answer. But anyway, it's not the point. Right? The point is people throw out things, throw out questions. They're not questions. They just heard something, what about this? What about that? My question would be, does that really stop you from sleeping at night? Right? That's the question. Yeah, I was once by my in-laws for a couple weeks, and the day before we were leaving, so my in-laws had, people over, and a doctor comes over to me in the community. He's like, can I ask you a question? I was like, anything, ask me anything, go ahead. I was like, I heard so many other conversations about a lot of meaningless things. I was like, sure, go ahead. What was his question? That was his question. That was the question about the, comparing what science says about the age of the universe, comparing it to the Torah. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate question, right? But sometimes people throw out questions. That's my point here, is they throw out questions. Why? Because they throw out questions. Because they're not necessarily interested in the answer. They throw out a question, they heard such an idea, such a thing. How can you compare this and that? So, you could answer the question. Someone has an answer. But what's the problem? The problem is they're just throwing it out there. You have to see why they're asking the question. That's the obvious thing. You have to see why they're asking the question. They could be just asking the question because they want to make you fidget. They want to say, oh, see, there's no answer. Why do people suffer? Why is my child born with leukemia? Why did and they know it's a strong question that's not going to have a good answer. Maybe not have a good answer. It's not going to satisfy them, whatever it is. They have to see. There's an agenda. But my question would be, see, it's always good to throw back a question with a question. And they say, well, where's God during the Holocaust? Right? So you say, well, I got a great book on it. Want to read it? They're not interested. Right? A lot of people are not going to be interested. Why do they throw it out there? Because they want to make you fidget. They just want to throw it out there. They say, God is cruel. Why would I believe in a cruel God? Why does God make people suffer if you believe in that God? Why do people suffer? It's a good question. It's a legitimate question. You ever read the book of Job? No. Any philosophy? No. Okay. Is it a question that you have trouble sleeping at night? In other words, it keeps you up late at night. So a lot of these things, I would say no. Now, some individuals tell me it's not true. Tell me it's totally not true. It really bothers me. This, okay. So, question that really bother a person, are they searching for an answer? And I don't believe a lot of people are searching for answers. They just throw out the question up, no answer. Look it up on Google. No, I'm not even going to do that. And I don't believe this because I don't believe it. Did you read anything? No. Philosophy? No. Torah? No. So you're not really interested in an answer, right? So the point is not to get caught up in this whole point here, right? The point is that a person, what's going to happen? What's going to happen over here? Person's going to get all caught up in the question. Gee, what's the answer? Do we have a good answer? They're not even interested in the answer. I have to sit there and answer them? What do I have to answer them for? Right? But let's get back to the point here. Person has an open heart. Now, he's going to think deeply into things to come up with different ideas from his own knowledge, not from others. Now, what does it mean he's going to think on his own? Didn't we just say if I learn with someone else, I'm going to get greater knowledge, greater understanding? You bounce ideas off of someone? That's a whole different thing. But if he's got an open heart, what is he doing? What is he doing over here? He's analyzing something. He's analyzing something and he's looking at it from a lot of different angles. Right? Someone put on my page the other day, because I mentioned this story many times. My wife, when she was becoming religious, asked a conservative rabbi, asked the following question: you allowed to ride a bike on Shabbos? Right? So he goes, "Want to know what I do?" It's like, I don't care what you do. I'm not interested in what you do. I want to know, according to Jewish law, you allowed to ride a bike? And obviously he didn't know the answer, so he said, I ride a bike on Shabbos. That was his answer. So someone put it on my Facebook feed, right, and said, you're allowed to ride a bike, on Shabbos, ... My answer was, no. Someone said, what? You're not allowed to ride a bike on Shabbos? Right? How are you not allowed to ride a bike on Shabbos? Right? What's the problem? Right? What's the problem? So to speak. So someone, let me get the question here. Well, the question was, how can you say that? Right? Is bicycle riding allowed on Shabbos? Right? So I gave different reasons why it's forbidden. But what's the point here? The point over here is the following. There are a lot of aspects over here. There are a lot of different things going on. So in that, I'll just give, one example. Use this as an example, right? There are four answers, four potential, four potential reasons why a person's not allowed to ride a bike on Shabbos, just on this topic. One is, let's say something goes wrong with the bike, flat tire, chain falls off, got to fix it, right? And that would be forbidden. Could be doing a weekday activity, another problem. Could be you're going to travel further, than you're allowed to travel on Shabbos. And what about an Eruv? What if there's no Eruv that allows you to carry, or, you go outside that area? Okay, there are four different potential reasons over here. Obviously not the topic, but what's the point? What's the point over here? The point over here is that you have to be able to look at things in different ways. In other words, there's a statement. I'll give an example. The Gemara in Kedushin says, the Gemara in Kedushin, I think it's like a Kedushin or Sanhedrin, that says that a person going to sin, when's a person going to sin? Misheniknas boy ruach shtus. When enters in him a foolish thought. Now let's stop for a second. It's going to enter in him a foolish thought. What foolish thought are we talking about? Any foolish thought? Does it have to do with someone, somebody made a statement, I don't know, they spoke Lashon Hara, and then someone heard it, and then that caused them to say something. Or let's say, we mentioned before, the King Solomon says in Proverbs, that somebody was a scoffer. So you listen to someone who scoffs, you also scoff, right? So what does it mean, entered in their mind a foolish thought? How do we define a foolish thought? Now, you could read that statement, understand it superficially, and say, okay, when a person has a foolish thought, they're going to come to sin, right? But you could read it like a newspaper, or you could sit on it for a minute or two. You want to cover ground as well, but think about it. What does it mean it entered to you a foolish thought? Now, you could come from a lot of different angles. Maybe come from 2 different angles, 3 different angles, 4 different angles. You sit there and analyze. You sit there and think, what possibly could it mean? What possibly is going on? So I remember when I was first learning how to learn. That's why you need teachers to teach you how to learn Talmud. right? But you have to learn how to think. In school, we're not necessarily taught how to think. We're taught how to spit back information. We might have to analyze information a little bit, here and there, but we're taught we're taught to spit back information in general. Now, if that's true, am I taught how to think? I'm not taught how to think, right? So I remember, learning this many, many years ago when I was first learning how to learn, and most places don't teach this way, but where I was learning at the time, they were teaching us to learn without commentary. Figure out what the Talmud says, before going to commentary. Now, most places will not do that because you get stuck. You get stuck not really knowing what's going on and throwing out all kinds of ideas that don't make sense, that are not really what's going on. But what do they want you to? What do they want you to teach? What did they want to teach? They wanted to teach a person to analyze what's going on, and most likely, if they analyze very well what's going on, I'm not talking days, hours, different things, all kinds of things. What are they analyzing? What are they analyzing over here? What are they going to, let's say better. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're probably going to come up with most questions that the commentaries ask. In other words, if a person's learning very well, a lot of times they're going to hit what Rashi said. A lot of times they may hit a question that Tosfos might have asked, or the Rashba, or the Ritva, or any of the great early commentators, later commentaries. Right? Some of them we won't hit, maybe some of them we will hit, but if you're learning well, you may ask questions that everyone else asks. Now that's good. That means you're going in the right path. Now, the question is, what's the answer to that? Okay. Right? So that's a different issue. Could be many different answers, potentially. So the first thing is that Rebbe Elazar ben Arach opened his heart and allowed him to think deeply into things and come up with different ideas from his own. Why? Because he didn't give up. He sat there and he thought. He thought maybe it means like this. Maybe it means like that. Look up other sources, different things, whatever it is. Right? Very hard to do it on your own. Right? It's always good. Obviously, we mentioned to have someone to study with. Very good. Right? But at the same time, what happened? What happened over here? He's learning on his own. And he's coming up with all these different ideas, potentially. Now, some of the ideas he's going to scratch. Why he's going to scratch, a bunch of them? He's going to scratch them one very simple reason, because you got other sources disagree. Or, he answers up in his own way, even without these other sources, whatever it is. But he's open-minded enough that he's analyzing from a lot of different perspectives. And it could be perspectives that go against what he thinks. See, that's not such an easy thing. In other words, we're wired a certain way. We think a certain way. You learn with someone else, most people do not think the same. They're not wired the same. Right? So you bounce ideas off each other in order to see if this is what it means, if this is what it's speaking about, and what are the ramifications. But here you're talking about someone who's open-minded enough, or his heart is open so much, he's looking at it from so many different perspectives. Now again, it's not so easy to do. But different perspectives have different ramifications. And there could be a nuance, maybe, in the words. That someone will say, wow, it means like this because the word's like this. Or someone will say, no, it means like this because the word's like this. I'm going to speak about this tomorrow in the book of Leviticus a little bit. Right? Exactly what the version of a certain statement was, and there are ramifications. Did it say it in this language? Passive? Did it say it in an active language? There's a difference. And there are going to be repercussions if there's a difference. So now you got to take all this into account. So over here, he's thinking deeply into things, which a lot of people don't, in general. Because, I'll give an example. It's kind of a stupid example. Someone's playing, doing a crossword puzzle. Someone's playing Sudoku, or whatever it is. And they get stuck. So what do? Try and get around the problem, try and do other things, right? The crossword puzzle, you do other things till you get stuck on something else. Whatever, eventually come back to it. Let's say you don't have an answer. You don't have an answer. You're thinking like this, thinking like that. Nope, that doesn't fit. This doesn't fit. Or in general, you don't know what it is. So what does the person do? You can sit there and just leave it blank. Come back to it one day. Right? But what are some people going to do? I can't say the majority. I don't know what the stats are here. So you can take what I say with a grain of salt. But what are some people going to do? If there's an answer in the back, they'll look it up. They'll look it up and put it in. Why? Because they don't want to lose time. They don't want to sit there and spend 20 minutes, half an hour trying to maybe think like this, think like that, maybe look it up on Google, whatever it is. Right? But the whole point is to do it from your own memory. Not looking for help over here. Right? So Sudoku, okay, going to be harder to do. Right? You're not going to be able to look it up online, let's say, but there'll be answers in the back. So what's the person going to do? They're going to sit there for 20 minutes, half an hour, trying to work it on their own? Or are they going to do other things? Right? Meaning they're going to look it up. Because how many people want to get stuck? They don't want to get stuck. Nobody wants to get stuck. Right? But the more you use your brain, the more you think, you might come up with an idea out of the box. You might not be right. Right? You might not be right, but you're going to use your brain. You're going to think. A lot of people today, they don't use their brain. Their brain's atrophy. Everything is instantaneous. So you get stuck in Sudoku. What are you going to do? Look up the answer. Again, people are going to say it's not true. There's some people who won't do that, and they'll spend a lot of time on it. Fine. I think people have very short attention span. They want to feel they accomplished, so they get stuck. What are they going to do? Are they going to sit there and work hard and plug away? And try and think of different ways, different answers. This fits in, it doesn't fit in, how it should fit in, or are they just going to give up and look up the answer? So you tell me, it depends. Depends how frustrated they get. It depends how much time they have. Again, I'm not going to overgeneralize it because I'll get accused of that also. But I would venture to say, since we know today the attention the attention span of a person, at least it used to be the amount of time it took to watch a commercial, right? So 30 years ago, how much time was that? About 6 minutes. Today, commercials just flash images. Boom, boom, boom. That means there's no attention span. People have very little attention span. So if you have little attention span, you get stuck like this, I would think, again, take what I say with a grain of salt. I would think, what are you going to do? You're going to look up the answer. You don't want to waste time. You want to cover ground, so to speak. You don't want to get sidetracked, whatever. And so, okay. So in learning, same thing. A person has to know how much time to spend on something. A person can learn something and have a question, come back to it, still have the question, not find an answer. So what do? Either you get stuck on it, or you write down the question, you move on. Now, if it's something, and this is just about learning in general, if it's something that's crucial to understanding simple explanation, then you can't go further. Then you got to draw the line. Why do I say that? Because if it's something basic and it's inherent in understanding what's going on, and you don't even have that, then you got to wait. Then you got to figure out an answer, and get an answer, But let's say you had a question, you didn't see the address. You didn't see the address. You looked up certain things. You didn't see the address. Okay, leave it as a question. You could, a person can sit there and spend, 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, dig in and still not find anything. So then you got to know to move on, because otherwise you get bogged down. But what do you do in such a situation? Write down the question. You write down the question, get back to it. Somehow try and come back to it. But if you're going according to not even knowing the basic knowledge of what's going on, you can't cover ground that way. Why not? Because you don't know the basics of what's going on over here. Right? So you gotta, so there are different ways to analyze. So he's telling you over here, right? He's telling you over here, what was one of the merits of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach? What was one of the great things about him? He was able to come up with a lot of different ideas on his own. Now, you're going to say, what about everybody else? Didn't they do the same thing? Well, that was something he excelled at. Right? That set him apart from everyone else. Doesn't mean other people didn't do that. per se, but he excelled. He excelled at a different level. Totally different level. I'll give an example. One of my rabbis learned with one of the Torah giants of the last generation. They were learning something, and he said, what was the biggest wonder, about this Torah giant? Is that, let's say whatever tractate they were learning, he probably learned it 100 times. So he probably knows the commentaries inside and out, and just about everything there. So how does somebody like that, if they already know, where it's going and what the commentaries say, and all that, and who agrees, disagrees, what comes out according to Jewish law, blah, blah, blah. So the novelty, one of my rabbis says, is like this. How does somebody like that look at the text like they never saw it? In other words, they learned it 100 times. They learned it 1,000 times. Right? They learned it so many times. How in the world do you look at it like you never saw it before? So that's hard. That 100% is hard. So here you take all the biases out. Takes all the biases out. And what does he do? He looks at it like he never saw it before. That's greatness. That 100% is greatness. Because if you already know where it goes, and how we hold, and this and that, and what all the arguments are, you can say, hey, what's the fun in learning there? Where's the scholarship? There's always more to learn. It's always deeper to learn. A lot of different levels here. But that, I would think, is very hard. In other words, you know something like the back of your hand, and you have to look at it like you don't know anything. Right? So that's a very hard thing. That is a very hard thing to do. So here he's coming up with different ideas and looking deeply into things on his own knowledge. He's not getting it from other people. Now, once he has a certain level of knowledge, whatever this topic is, let's say whatever it is, then he speaks to other people based on that knowledge. But he's not getting his knowledge from them. That's the point. He's not getting his knowledge from them. Where's his knowledge coming from? It came from himself. It came into looking things up himself, coming up with his own ideas. Now, someone's going to say, well, it doesn't seem like so much fun. Right? It's hard work. Sure, it's hard work. But you're sitting there, again, you have to know how much time to spend on certain things, not to get bogged down. But at the same time, what are you doing? You're looking into something deeply, and you're coming up with different ideas. In other words, you're looking at something from many, many different angles. Maybe it's like this. Yes, no, how does it apply? It doesn't apply. Ramifications. It fits in, it doesn't fit in. Look at it from this angle, a third angle, a fourth angle. That's a whole different thing. Because once a person does that, and they're sitting for a long time, they're sitting, let's say better, they're sitting for a certain amount of time. And they think like this, they think like that, they think like the other thing. And they say, how can it be? I got another source that disagrees. Or I got another commentary who says like this. And they sit there looking up and they're banging their head. Oh, but this commentator gives this answer, but I don't like this answer because I have another question. Or whatever it is. But then they can take that knowledge and then they can go to others. But the point is, they have the knowledge on their own. They're looking it up on their own, right? It's coming from them. So they're coming up with 5, 6, 7 different ideas, based on the way they're analyzing. That's a huge thing. That's a huge thing. What does somebody do in general? What can somebody do? They could look at something, read it, and say, okay, I got a certain level of understanding, let's go further. And then they'll look at the commentaries and say, oh, very good, analyze like this, analyze like that, analyze like the other thing, but it's not coming from them. They're not thinking the question, right? In other words, let's say they came up with a question and they see one of the commentaries comes up with the same question. Very good. Makes them feel like $1 million. Why? Because they see someone has the same question, right? So they're coming up with things before they're looking at what everyone else says. Now, this is a harder thing to do. As long as you know how to learn and you're going in the right direction, that's one thing, right? But in general, what do we want to do? We want to cover ground. We don't want to sit there and think about it, because then you go word by word, line by line, and what are you doing? You're sitting there. 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by. You're still stuck on the same line, right? You're still stuck over here. So the problem is, we have the desire to want to cover ground, but at the same time, we got to think, right? The Torah is about thinking. The Torah is about, the Torah is about coming up with ideas. Now, you have to have the right idea. You have to know what's going on, but it comes from you. It's not something that's handed to you. It's something you got to think, and a lot of people don't want to sit there, and work it out, because it's hard. But anyone, again, who's ever seen a yeshiva in action, yelling and screaming, hands flapping all over the place, etc., arguing about what's going on, a lot of books out in front of them, because they're getting to the essence of what the text says. But, the merit over here of Rebbe Eliezer ben Arach is he did it better than everyone else. He came up with these different ideas on his own. Not just he heard what someone else said. See, we could make ourselves look better through someone else. You're learning with someone, and 90% of all the hard questions they came up with. So you're going back and forth, wow, I really gained like this, I really gained like that, but they weren't your questions. Now you understand they weren't your questions. At the same time, you have a different level of understanding, right? But there's always the but, and that is you also got to come up with your own ideas. Not just enough to take in information. You also got to think. Not on the same level. Some people are on a much higher level. Some people less. Whatever it is. Some people, let's say it might take them longer because they're slower. Let's say they're slower to understand, or their brain doesn't work as fast. Let's say something like that. So, okay, they're different people, different levels. But the point over here is that we have to think for ourselves. I remember one of my rabbis once told me, he says, don't ask me, think. You don't have to agree with my explanation. But think, how do you see it? How do you view it? In the way the commentaries say, or they don't say it, whatever the case is. Think. Today, some people argue that, let's say when it comes to conversion is a good example, right? People take classes, they're spoon-fed. They have, reading material they have to do on their own, but essentially they're given information. Now, someone once accused me of that. They said, you're spoon-feeding people. You're right. Because I want to make sure they get the right information. I'll give an example. In the Kitzur Hilchos Shabbos. Let's say better. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Concise book of Jewish law. Husband and wife come in front of rabbis. They read a whole bunch of chapters. They happen to be learning the laws of Shabbos. Right? So in the laws of Shabbos, what was it talking about? Laws of Shabbos are talking about carrying from a public domain to a private domain or vice versa. Right? Without an Eruv. Without something that allows you to carry on Shabbos. So they go to the rabbinical court. They read a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of chapters. The rabbinical court asked them, again, that was the main topic of carrying from a public to a private domain. So what happened? So they said, well, do you have any questions? So they said, yeah, they were learning this. And there were two words that were transliterated, but were not explained. In other words, they were transliterated, but not translated. What were the words? A Reshut HaRabim and a Reshut HaYachid. What's a Reshut HaRabim? A public thoroughfare. What's a Reshut HaYachid? A private domain. So they said, yeah, those are the only two words we didn't understand. But what was the whole chapter about? The whole chapter was about speaking from carrying from a private to a public domain. That's what the whole chapters were about. So they said, well, there are only two words we didn't understand, right? And those are the two words about that topic. So in other words, they didn't understand the two most important words, which were a private domain and a public thoroughfare. And that means they didn't understand anything. So I always say that in these classes, I'm going to explain every last Hebrew term that's, if there's any Hebrew term that's used, because I want to make sure that people don't make mistakes, that people understand clear, what the word means. So there are no questions. Someone's going to read these two chapters, let's say, and they're going to read all about this and they don't understand anything. So that was a total waste of time. I'm not interested in wasting people's time here, right? So the point is that, why would I, give over this information and spoon feed people? Because I want to make sure they don't make mistakes. Because there's a lot of material, tremendous amount of material over here. So here, understanding things in a deep way, some people say, well, I'm not such a deep person. Whatever it is, a person has to think. You can't read Torah or the commentaries or anything in spiritual terms like you're reading a newspaper. That you can't do, right? That you can't do, right? That's for sure. You got to be careful. 100%, 100%, you can't do that. And what's going to happen? The person's never going to know how to think. The purpose of Torah is, you have to know what to do. 100%. But you have to know how to think. Right? You have to know how to think. So what's the month of Elul? The month of Elul is all about introspection. It's all about preparation. Right? It's all about preparation for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur. To think, what did I do during the year? What do I need to work on? Right? And there are great books to read, during this time. Path of the Just, Gates of Repentance, The Ways of the Righteous. Make us feel like a piece of dirt, but get us to acknowledge things we've done wrong. Probably many things, that we've done wrong. But see, the point over here is we have to think. Right? And Rebbe Elazar ben Arak shows over here that a person can think from their own knowledge. We don't think, a person may think we don't have that much knowledge. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how much a person knows. But when you learn, you got to think. There are no cliff notes. I've never found them. Keep looking, but I never found them. You can't just read through things. You got to think. Again, sometimes you have to cover ground, but you have to think. You have to think in different ways, not the normal way we would think. Right? That's how we analyze. That's how we analyze anything. Look at what it says. Do we take it at face value? What are its underlying meaning? Where does it go? What are the ramifications? Many things. It comes along, Mori Rebbe, Arav Agon Moshe Machlita, should be well. In his commentary on Pirkei Avos, he says, why did he merit this? Why did he merit to be a spring flowing stronger and stronger? You know why he merited it? Merited it because of fear of heaven. Because of his fear of heaven, he understood many things through his own knowledge. And he saw heavenly help in his learning. There was a story with the Panovich Rav. The Panovich Rav, student of the Chofetz Chaim, and he started the Panovich Yeshiva and he was learning with somebody. And the person was slow. Panovich Rav happened to be a genius, genius in learning. The person wasn't keeping up. It wasn't that the person, was a fool, but the person, didn't grasp things as much as Panovich Rav. You ever heard one day a Panovich Rav was thinking of changing, going with someone else. And he understood how great the Panovich Rav was. So one night, Panovich Rav was learning the women's section. Someone comes into the base medrash and the study hall, and all he can hear is wailing and sobbing with the ark opened. With the ark where the Torah scrolls are. And the ark is open, and he's trying to learn. This person's wailing. This person's crying. Right? He goes a little bit closer, and he hears what the person is saying. And he's begging the Rabboni Shalom. He's begging God himself. He says, I don't want to lose this person as a study partner. He says, I want you to give me the knowledge. I know I'm slower. I know I'm much slower. And I want you to allow me to keep up with him and whatever. But he's wailing, sobbing. 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour. Then afterwards, he stops, closes the ark, and that's it. So the Panovich Rav felt bad. He says, how can I leave? How can I leave this person? How can I not study with him? So he decided the next day, he's not going to go back, we're going to learn. Right? What happened? Amazing story. What happened? Person started to pick up. Person started to understand quicker. And the learning between them was unbelievable. The person became a great rabbi in his own right. What do you see? What do you see? He wanted it so bad. He prayed so hard to open the ark in tears, begging that God should help him in his learning. Some Rebbe here says, through a person's fear of heaven, how can he understand things through his own knowledge and reach high spiritual levels? Because God helped him. God helped him in his learning. Because if a person doesn't have proper fear of heaven, my Rebbe says, a person could be brilliant. A person can string a lot of ideas together. But what's going to happen? Even with all the depth, blink, it's going to fall apart. It's going to fall apart at the seams. Right? A person can be brilliant in so many different ways. But see, if they don't have proper fear of heaven, well, God's not going to help them. And then they're going to get exposed. Because then their depth is going to really fall apart. So there are people out there, they may mean well. And deep down in their heart, it's not about ego, or as we say here in Israel, ego, right? It's not about ego. It's not about showing off knowledge. What's it about? They want truth. What happens? They get sidetracked. Honor, maybe jealousy, and it takes them away. They could be brilliant. But see, brilliance, as Coffman would say, doesn't necessarily butter the biscuit. Why doesn't it butter the biscuits? Because they're going to get exposed as a fraud that they are. All right, ego could destroy a person, meaning they have hubris, they're conceited. They can say a lot of nice things without saying anything. There are plenty of people out there. Plenty. They talk, you look what they say. It's like fluff. Fluff means there's nothing to what they say. Nothing. You just have to think a little bit. And they use flowery language. Maybe highfalutin language, maybe, to say nothing. People like that. There are other people say let's say, simplistic things, and they're way off the mark. Or they say things that make them into a heretic. Over here. Right? But you don't have proper fear of heaven. So if you don't have proper fear of heaven, God's not helping you here. And we need help in everything. The Gemara says in Kedushin, The Gemara says the person has an evil inclination. What's the antidote? What's the antidote to the evil inclination? The antidote is Torah. Learning Torah, that's the antidote. Now, the Gemara then goes on to say, you need the antidote of Torah, but I also need the antidote of what? I need heavenly help. If God doesn't help me, I can't overcome my evil inclination. So even if a person stumbles once, twice, 3 times, 5 times, 100 times, and they've learned all the Musar, etc., it doesn't help. Doesn't seem to help. Right? Someone asked me a question. The question last week. Let me see if I find it here. Someone asked me. Someone asked me over here that they have a tendency not to want to offend people. But what happens? Sometimes they're blunt. I hope they didn't get that from me. Right? Sometimes they're blunt. What should they do to work on it? Right? So a person has to realize, someone asked the question, you don't, necessarily have to be blunt, you gotta be nice. Right? You don't have to be nice to others. Right? Being blunt, there is what to say. I would agree. Sometimes it's good to be blunt, because then you don't have problems. Right? You just, you knock them out, so to speak. But a person has to hear someone else. There are 2 things here. One thing is what is said. What did the person say? Now, the second thing is, without adding or subtracting anything they said, what did they mean? What is behind what they said? So we mentioned before, someone's got an agenda. They're gonna say something. They're not interested in an answer. Right? Depends how they say it. Depends how they word it. Somebody else asked the question innocently. Does that mean you have to be blunt and ram it down their throat? Nope. Torah doesn't mean that. They're asking an innocent question. So you gotta have patience. Patience is not an easy thing. Especially we've been through a lot during the day, and someone throws something out there, you just want to rip their head off because, you're not having an easy day over here for whatever reason. You're going through a difficult time. Or you just don't have patience. Right? So it's kind of a hard question to answer. Right? It's a thing based on patience, I would say. Right? How does the person stop being blunt? Well, one thing is got to work on patience. Right? That 100%. It's not easy to work on patience. I'm like, we don't have patience. So what? Right? We have a lot of things. A lot of things we have to work on. Right? But what's the problem over here? Right? In other words, so what was I going to answer? One of the things is that, we understand it's bad. We understand being blunt, let's say, not a good thing. Under whatever circumstance. Right? Not a good thing. So if it's not a good thing, to my answer was you got to learn Musar. You got to learn about having patience. That's what you got to do. Think about it. Be calm. Someone asks you something again. We're not talking someone's obnoxious. Or someone's got an agenda. You just use patience. There's a story with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Rabbi Chaim Coffman had one student, took him 400 times to explain to him. And then one time he was in a rush, and he had to get somewhere. And after the 400th time, the student still didn't understand. He explained another 400 times. Right? Because the student felt that Rabbi Chaim Coffman was in a rush and whatever, and he didn't get it. It took him 800 times. We would stop after like 4 or 5. Right? There's sometimes, I said to certain people certain things. I explained it one way, they didn't like it. Or they didn't understand it. It's okay, I explained it another way. Right? I explained it a third way. Right? After like the 4th or 5th time, I said either you're going to get it or you're not going to get it. You're going to say, what happened to patience? You have a certain amount of patience. But if you explain things in 3 or 4 different ways, they're not willing to hear any of them, your patience sort of runs out. It's kind of like, I'll throw this out there, anyone's ever argued with a missionary? You know what it's like to argue with a missionary? What do you do? You give them an answer. And they go to something else. They go to a different topic. You answer that, they go to something else because they're programmed. They don't have answers on their own, right? In other words, you ask them a question they can't answer, they go on to something else. So, is it worthwhile to have a conversation with somebody like that? No, right? You're wasting time. You're totally wasting time. So again, we have to learn patience. That's, it's a character trait we have to work on. And there are a lot of times a person doesn't have patience for the reasons could be 100% legit. We just, we lose patience. A person has a child, however young, and the child asks the same thing 3 times, 4 times. You answered, no, it's like this. No, but what, but they ask the same thing over and over. I just said, it's like this and like this. And they ask again. And they ask, well, don't you have to work on your patience over here? You're not going to sit there and lash out to them. Kid's 4. You can't yell at them. But what happens? We're tired. We're cranky. We go through different things, whatever it is. And we don't have patience. Don't they say patience is a virtue? But if somebody, says something, and again, this is one of my personal pet peeves, is that somebody will say something, not thinking, not understanding, not looking into things, and someone will tell you, give me this answer of life after death in 15 seconds. I don't have patience for that, right? I can watch your CFL more than that. Maybe 10 seconds, right? Because those people can't make it in the NFL. But okay, I digress here, right? You don't have patience for that. You want to sit there and you're going to make fun and you're going to scoff and so, here's the link. Go watch it. You want to watch it? Good. You don't want to watch it? That's not my problem. Shouldn't we have more patience? But if someone's coming just to make fun of you, not a question of patience over here. That you can give a snappy answer. That you don't have to sit there and take it. Right? That you can do. Right? That you can be blunt. I'm not saying all the time it's good to be blunt. Right? Someone has an agenda and they're not interested in an answer, I'm going to be blunt. Isn't circumcision barbaric? No, barbarians don't do it. They're not interested in an answer. Being blunt in that case is fine. And, somebody say something really nasty many, many years ago to me and my wife, we answered them in 3 seconds. Put them in their place in a very short amount of time, person never bothered us again. So, wow, you guys are tough. I was like, listen, you make a below the belt comment without knowing anything. Because you can't read Hebrew, you've never learned the sources, whatever. You think we're just going to sit there and take it? Now, was that the right thing to do? Maybe not. But you know what? The person never bothered us again. There is, being blunt is okay in certain circumstances. Patience is hard. Patience is hard. And whatever it is, it's just a hard thing. Because during the day, we're strung out, we're tired, and all these things. And someone asks the same question 3 times. Or I'll tell you where I lost patience. Use myself as an example. I had someone that would ask me questions on a regular basis, and then bring proof against what I said. They said, yeah, but this one holds like this. Or that one holds like that. So you know what my answer was? So why are you asking me? You're right, there are different opinions. So I'm giving you this opinion. That was it. I stopped taking their questions after a while. I just lost patience because I didn't think that was respectful. Right? But the point is, you need fear. You need fear of heaven. You need help of heaven. Without help of heaven, we don't get anywhere. We don't get anywhere. We can't even overcome the evil inclination by ourselves. The evil inclination is too hard. Does a great job. Doesn't need me to agree. He does a great job. But without that, how are we ever going to overcome the evil inclination? God needs to help us. God needs to help us in our learning. Right? I heard a great rabbi once say, if you understand a Rashi in the Parsha, if you understand a Rashi in the Talmud, or whatever, he says, go get a piece of fruit. Go have a piece of chocolate. Why? Because we're living in a very low generation today. Right? We need a lot of heavenly help here. No question about it. But you have to want it from the depth of your heart. Because if you don't have fear of heaven, all the great knowledge is going to come apart. The heresy is going to come out. And that's what my Rebbe here brings down further. He brings down from the Ridvaz from Slutsk. And his commentary at the end of Parshas Truma. The Ridvaz over there says the name of Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, of blessed memory. Right? Who's Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, famous student of the Vilna Gaon? Rabbi Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago. And this is a huge topic also. We'll see how far we get with it. And he says that anyone has any heresy within them, any little bit of heresy in them, will not be able to get to the truth of Torah. Let's analyze that for a second. What does that mean? They're not going to be able to get to the truth of Torah. Because God's only going to reveal the depth of Torah to someone, right? To someone that has fear of heaven. Meaning, no matter how great someone's sermon is, or knowledge may be, that's not going to lead to truth in the Torah learning. In other words, they could have unbelievable knowledge, but they don't have fear of heaven, and they have any bit of heresy within them, then it's not real Torah. Meaning, someone can have great knowledge, not utilized properly, can often be skewed because their base is faulty. And again, we see this all the time. Unfortunately, we see it all the time based on people who are frauds in the Torah world. Got to be careful not to listen to them. And ego gets in the way. Right? Famous story, though, we say. There was this Reconstructionist, whatever you want to call him, type of rabbi. He's at a funeral, and someone comes up to him innocently and says, Rabbi, I see you don't have your rabbi's book here. He says, here, you can borrow mine. You can borrow mine, or we can share it, whatever. Did it innocently, no showmanism, showing him up or whatever. So what does this person look at him? This rabbi, big ego, total heretic, but okay. Big ego, what does he say? What does he say over here? He goes, young man, I don't need your book. I write books. I don't need your book. Guy, person, wrote books, knowledgeable in the subject, whatever it is. Ego over here. Person can have knowledge. We're not going to say not. But you know what? If you don't have proper fear of heaven, that knowledge can be skewed. Right? And that means their base is faulty. Now, it could be you can have people that straddle the line. Straddle the line, meaning that they're going to push orthodoxy as far as they can. In other words, let's say there are certain things we would never rely on, maybe in certain circumstances. And some people will say, okay, we can do this and we can do that based on that. But it's something you don't rely on normally. If it's something you don't rely on normally, how can you say that's the best way to do it? And we can do it at the outset. You can't do that. Right? You can't go to Webster's fifth definition and tell me this is okay. I'll give one example. The first, I should do a trivia contest. Right? What was the first, more than 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the first episode of Controversial Issues? Right? What was the first episode? It was about homosexuality. Gave out the answer. About homosexuality. It's about 6 months after the shooting in Miami in a gay bar. Right? I could have put his, put the numbers through the roof. Got them great numbers, but it was 6 months later. So it already cooled off. But what did somebody say? Why do I mention Webster's fifth definition? Because someone claimed in the chat, and they said, but homosexuality is only forbidden because of sorcery, because of idolatry. Because what was my whole point? It's forbidden because of immorality. It's forbidden also for non-Jews, by the way. Just anyone non-Jewish out there. It goes against Noahide laws as well. But be that as it may, what did the person claim? And I'll tell you why I said Webster's fifth definition. Because if you look at the book of Leviticus chapter 18, there are 21, 22 verses there about immorality. Right? What's forbidden? What relationships are forbidden? Which we also read, by the way, at the afternoon service on Yom Kippur, of all days. We read about these immoral relationships. Now, there's a verse there that also says, it's forbidden to do sorcery. Now, someone with a little bit of knowledge is going to say, there's always a juxtaposition of verses. So I can always learn out something from two verses being one next to another. True? That is very true. In many cases like that. Now, the only problem is, and the commentaries ask this question. In other words, I have 21 verses that speak about immoral relationships, forbidden relationships. I have one verse that talks about sorcery, right? Talks about idolatry. So over there, the person wanted to claim, when he's talking about immorality and talking about homosexuality, we're talking about homosexuality, let's say better, homosexuality, the next verse talking about what? About idolatry or sorcery. So it's only forbidden for that. But otherwise, it wouldn't be forbidden. Now, there's a good question. Why do I have that verse about sorcery or idolatry? That's a good question. Legitimate question. Why do I call it Webster's fifth definition? I call it Webster's fifth definition one very simple reason. And my simple reason is, what do you do with the other 20 verses? The other 20 verses tell me forbidden relationships. I got one verse tells me not that way. Talks about sorcery or idolatry. So it must be only about sorcery and idolatry. So let's do the math over here. Right? So if I got 21 divided by 22 verses, that's 95, 0.4545%. 95%. 95% of the chapter up until this point is talking about what? Forbidden relationships. I have one verse that tells me talking about sorcery or idolatry. So how can you tell me, you're right, I agree. There's such a thing called juxtaposition of verses, and I need an explanation what that verse is doing there. Good. But how can you uproot what the whole pet chapter talks about? I mean, that's what the Christians do. I mean, they're good at that. Look at Jeremiah chapter 30. You got the new covenant, what we call the Brit Chadashah. Right? Why is it called the new covenant? No such thing as a new covenant. Can't go against Moshe Rabbeinu. Can't add or subtract to the Torah. Right? I have inherent logic. So what's going on in the previous verses? Jeremiah is screaming like he's doing most of the book of Jeremiah. And he's screaming at the Jewish people to repent. That God's going to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. God's going to destroy the Torah over here. And he's telling you to reconnect to the old covenant. And he wants you to repent and reconnect to that old covenant. Oh, good question. Someone's going to say, the Christians say new covenant. If it's a new covenant, it's a whole different thing. Jewish people aren't chosen. Game over. No more CFL. It's over. But there's a problem. There's inherent logic. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that. For a number of reasons we just mentioned. But if you look at the whole beginning of the chapter, which they don't do, obviously, if you look at the beginning of the chapter, it's not talking about a new covenant. It's reconnecting the old covenant. And going to the ways of Moshe Rabbeinu. And what the Torah says. So you can't go against that. So they make it up as they go along. Very good. Right? But the problem is, if a person doesn't have proper fear of heaven, then they can say, see, I don't need your book, I write books. Embarrass someone in public. Embarrass someone in public. What's the punishment? You embarrass someone in public, you lose your porcelain world to come. Murder, an offshoot of murder. Even though many rabbinic authorities hold if a person murdered someone literally, you don't lose your portion of the world to come. But an offshoot of that, says Rabbeinu Yonah, in the case of repentance, you lose your portion of the world to come. That's kind of hard to understand. If it's an offshoot, you lose your portion of the world to come, but the thing itself, you don't. Good, it's a good question. Why that's so severe? Right? But there are a lot of frauds. And we've spoken about this many times. There are a lot of people we shouldn't listen to. And there's good reason. Someone will be out there. Someone will say, yeah, I understand. The book of Leviticus chapter 18 says, you're not allowed to be a homosexual. Okay, the act is an abomination, not the person, the act. So as you repent, but what are you going to do? Someone grows up 3-4 years old, and the boy's already attracted to other boys. He's already playing with dolls. So what do you think is going to happen to this kid? My kesher. What's the connection? I know the ultra orthodox will be upset with me saying this, but I don't believe God's gonna punish them. Why? It's something that goes against the very breadth of what the Torah says. Because the Torah says in the book of Genesis, that Adam and Eve, they clung to themselves. He didn't cling to another man. Right? It's going to destroy the institution of marriage. But the whole point is for a man to cleave to a woman, not the other way around. You can tell me they're wired a certain way, okay? Doctor once told me they're going to find a gene for that. Well, guess what? They're going to find a gene for people who like the CFL. That's the third time, right? They're going to find a special gene for them. And a special gene for people who get angry. And a special gene for people who don't want to give charity. And help out others. And do chesed and all this. Yeah, a lot of special genes out there. So what? So what if you have more of a tendency towards something? Doesn't mean it's permissible. You're right. That might be the case. You might be more susceptible to certain things. Okay? Does that mean I have to act on it? And what if I act on it? Am I going to use that as an excuse and say, God, you wired me this way? Let's say you did it. Let's say it came later in life. Because of things you watched and other things. Let's say. So that had a negative effect, 100%. So you wired yourself that way. So now you're going to complain? Now you're going to say, why'd you do this to me? You did it to yourself. God said, I didn't tell you to act on it. Now let's say God wired a person that way. And he made it much harder to fight against. Okay. But see, we have a lot of bad genes. Anger genes, screaming genes, right? People, don't like to get up early in the morning. God says, I don't care. You got to pray. So go to sleep early, whatever. A lot of things. I don't like to eat matzah, Gene. Shut up and eat the matzah. This is what you got to do. This is what your obligation is. Doesn't matter. But I'm wired a certain way. Don't you think God understands that? What's God going to answer? Right? If I was God, I put on my George Burns funny glasses, my funny mustache, what would I say? I was, of course I wired you that way. You're right. Because this is what you had to go through. That was one of your trials. Very good. Now, even if that's true, even if that's 100% true, did I tell you to act on it? I didn't tell you to act on it. I didn't tell you to go in that path. But you wired me that way. So there are people that have certain dispositions. There are people that don't like to give charity. People that are misers. There are people that get angry too easily. Or whatever the case is. We have all kinds of bad character traits. That is all true. So, again, for the month of Elul, we got to work hard. 100%, we have to work hard. It takes effort to uproot bad character traits. Right? Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says, however, we finish one. We'd fix one bad character trait. One! I'm not saying multiple. We got many things. Many things we need to do. We need to work on. Right? So we use this example of some quote-unquote rabbi is going to say, but it's not their fault. It's not their fault. That's the way when they were little kids. So it's not surprising. It doesn't matter if it's not surprising. Question is, are they going to get punished for it? And there are psychologists out there who can help these people. It's been proven that they can help these people. Okay. So even if it's not their fault, doesn't mean they can't get help. But see, it's such a big movement today, and has so much power. Different things. We're gonna keep this clean so you don't lose your license on the Roku network over here. But someone's gonna make such a statement. Come on, do you really believe? You really believe God's gonna punish people like that? That's heresy. That 100% is heresy. A person doesn't believe in resurrection of the dead. That's heresy. A person who believes everything in the Torah is true except one verse. That's heresy. A person like that, you can't listen to anything they say. You can't, because their Torah is skewed. So why are we talking about this? Because it means over here, if a person doesn't have proper fear of heaven, then their Torah is going to be skewed. It's going to be skewed. That's just what it is. They can justify it, in different ways. But what does it mean in general? It means their base of their Torah knowledge is faulty. And I would say further, if they have questions like this, why don't they go into their own rabbis to ask? How do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? Because they don't have rabbis to ask. They do things on their own because they think they're their own authority. Whatever, this topic we go on till tomorrow, which we're not going to. The point over here is, as we mentioned many times, you got to be careful. You have to be careful. People can ask all kinds of questions. I heard this rabbi say this. Is it true? Okay, it's a legitimate question. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. Where are they coming from? So to speak. So I would agree. You got to be careful. Someone doesn't believe in heaven and hell. That's a problem. A lot of it's steeped in Kabbalah. It doesn't matter. Reward and punishment is one of the 13 principles of the Rambam. Right? It's one of the 13 principles of faith. Can't go against any of the principles of faith if you're a Jew. You can repent. There is repentance. But at that point, it's such a basic belief. Within Judaism, it means that if you don't believe, let's say resurrection of the dead, coming of the Messiah, you don't believe, God is unique, God is one in the world, there's nobody like him, you lose your status as a Jew. Now, it doesn't mean you can't repent, but these are pretty serious things. So to say that when the Torah says that person's going to die, right, a homosexual's got the same status as someone desecrates Shabbos in public, and they will get killed by the Sanhedrin. If there was a Jewish Supreme Court and there was a temple in Jerusalem, they'd get killed. No, that's not what it means. God is not going to, take his wrath against them. Really? The Karaites are going to love me over here. That's what the Torah says. They're liable for a death penalty. I mean, they can't repent. There's repentance. Right? But, it's one thing. Again, it's one thing to do the act. Act is bad enough. It's a whole nother thing to go out and parade about it and brag about it. Right? That's a whole nother thing. Right? But the bottom line is their base is going to be faulty. And if their base is faulty, I don't care how brilliant they are. They can be 10 times more brilliant than me. They can have much more knowledge than me, but if their base is faulty, it doesn't matter. If the base is faulty, they're going to crumble. They 100% are going to crumble. And they're going to be exposed. They're going to get exposed. Because that's what God does. Because God has a certain amount of compassion. But at certain points, God's going to say, okay, I've had enough. And now I'm going to expose this person. And, right, you know what they say? What goes around comes around. We're going to see this. We're going to see this more in Pirkei Avos. But the same quote-unquote rabbi I mentioned before, he said, I write books, right? So we'll see. So we'll show. Use this person as an example, right? To take out the Torah from the ark, Shabbos, festivals, whatever it is. So, it's a mixed congregation. So what does this rabbi do? This rabbi walks behind the Torah scroll as it's being walked around the synagogue, and he kisses all the women. Can't make this up. He kisses all the women. Now, do you think there was any problem, over the years with him, let's say, making advances to other women? in the congregation? Oh yeah, there was a problem. There were cover-ups. But in the end, he got his farewell, blah, 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 but there were cover-ups. So, he got caught. But what did it stem from? So let's go back. Let's go back before the final act. What happened? So I got married, and my parents, my in-laws, had a reception, right, in their synagogue. So what do? So I speak to this rabbi before, and he's going to speak, right? He's going to speak, and he says, "Well, are you going to let me, He said, hey, are you going to deny me, the right, so to speak, to give a kiss to your wife or a hug to your wife?" So I told him, I said, yeah, but I said, if it would look so good in front of 300 people, family, friends, whatever, it would look so good if you give me a hug and a kiss. I said, it would look unbelievable in front of everyone else. Well, let's just say he didn't like the idea. Right? He didn't like the idea. Okay, so what happened? So he was a little bit miffed. Understandably so. What can he do? Can't hug this woman anymore. Give her a kiss or whatever. So, I denied him that. So we got even. How'd he get even? He got up to speak. And what's the first thing he says when he gets up to speak? He says, I used to be able to hug and kiss this woman before. Wife just looks at him and takes 3 steps backward. So what does he do? What does this moron do? So this moron, embarrasses me in public. It happened 30 years ago. More than 30 years ago. So I guess I got on people's nerves even back then. So he's like, I used to be able to, kiss this woman, and now I can't. Everyone got a nice chuckle out of it, trying to embarrass me in public. My wife. So what happened? What happened over here? So God orchestrated in a way, that, what did he say? So he got upset the fact I wouldn't let him kiss my wife. Now he goes around kissing all the women in the congregation. That's okay. That's okay. No one says anything. Even though he got caught doing certain things. This I won't let him to do. He's going to embarrass me in public. So you know what the old saying we said at the beginning of this story? What's the old saying? What goes around comes around. You want to embarrass me in this? I'm going to expose you in that. And he got exposed. It was years later, but he got exposed. The last person who took him down, they said, I can't believe it happened again. Somebody said, someone on the board, I don't know, someone else. But it happened more than once. Right? Now, why do I mention all this? Because, okay, I can't say I'm surprised. I can't even say the person's a fraud. The person's not a fraud because he doesn't know very much. Right? Never really learned in his life. Used to quote Dennis the Menace, from the pulpit. Okay. I would have quoted The Wizard of Id, Doonesbury maybe, Calvin and Hobbes. I don't know. Used to quote Dennis the Menace. Fine. Right? Somebody like that, though, got a big ego. Certainly got a big ego. Certainly doesn't have fear of heaven. Right? That's for sure. Right? But the base is totally faulty. And if the base is faulty, it can run into other problems. Right? What's the other problem we mentioned? What goes around comes around. You want to try and hide yourself and, whatever, what goes on behind closed doors? God's going to say, you know what? At a certain point, and some of the commentaries here in Pirkei Avos are going to explain that. That you're going to get exposed. 100% you're going to get exposed. This is what happened. Right? This is what happened. So, I mentioned person walking around behind the Torah scroll, kissing all the women. Yeah, so he got exposed. But you know what? I'm not sure that's the reason. Right? I'm just talking out loud here. That, why did he get exposed? Because that could have happened 30 years, 25 years before. More. It could have happened because he embarrassed me in public. Because of that, God took him down. Because he embarrassed a from person in public. Right? On something that's pretty disgusting. You can say, come on, it's just a kiss on the cheek, it's just a hug, whatever. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We hold the person in such a situation might have to give up their life for it. That's how severe it is. A person of the opposite sex wants to shake your hand. It can be a fish handshake, doesn't matter. Might have to give up your life for such a thing. That's how severe it is. But see, nothing ever goes unpunished. So this person wants to embarrass me in public, well, guess what? God took care of him. I mean, no longer in this world. I'm sure God's taking care of him. Right? But you embarrass someone in public, I didn't ask for that. I asked him to ham it up. I thought it'd be a great thing. Give me a big hug and a kiss. Tremendous. Okay, you didn't think it was so funny. But to the extent to try and embarrass me in public? In front of 300 family members? Friends? Bunch of people got a chuckle out of it. I don't think it was so funny. Oh, come on. What do you I didn't, I lose any sleep over it. I mentioned the story to show, when a person says something against someone else, a lot of times it means they have the same blemish. Oh, he won't let me, kiss this woman anymore. She won't let me, hug her and kiss her anymore. Well, you got a problem. You got a problem in that area. And guess what? You got exposed. Right? Now, he did these other things, walking around with the Sefer Torah on Shabbos or a festival, kissing women. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. But guess what? People knew things that he did or whatever, fine. But why did he finally get exposed in the end? It's kind of embarrassing how he left, but they still gave him a good send-off. Whatever. Because he embarrassed me in public. Now, that might not be the only reason. But God doesn't forget. He doesn't forget anything. Because he doesn't forget, this person got exposed later. Even though, he held face, so to speak, at the end. But people knew. People knew what this person did. What goes around comes around. So, a person can have great knowledge. They can have tremendous knowledge. But you know what? If the base is faulty, in general, and I see sometimes what, people I went to yeshiva with, and I see what they're doing. I see how they have, Baptists, other people come speak in their synagogue or whatever, being open-minded, the brains fall on the floor. The base is faulty. So when I hear if I would hear what they say, they're going to give this whole drasha, maybe it's true. They're going to give this whole sermon. Maybe it's all true what they say. They're quoting the right sources. They're explaining the way it should be. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You know why? Because if the base is bad and the base is faulty, then they're a fraud. And the Torah looks like Torah. The Torah can look like Torah. But if it's based on a bad thing, and the base is faulty, they're going to fall apart. They're going to get exposed. And they should get exposed. Right? Got to be careful. You got to be careful who we listen to. Some people talk a very good game. You have to be able to know how to listen. Some things are obvious. We mentioned earlier, someone's going to give their fifth Webster's fifth definition about homosexuality. Okay. After that, especially if they're a rabbi saying it's okay, or meant for that generation, but no one else says such a thing, I'm not going to listen to them. I'm going to call them out on it. Because if they have the power to influence, they should be kept shut. Their mouths should be kept shut. So you got to be careful, right? As we always say, you 100% have to be careful for who you listen to. And if a person has a question, right? If a person has a question, they should ask. Is this person someone we should listen to, someone we shouldn't listen to, etc. But it's problematic, right? It could be very much problematic. What's the reason? Look what they say. Look what they say over here. And if a person has a question, you should ask. Because again, what can a person say? They can say 100% the truth. Can't listen to them. 100% you can't listen to them. Right? I see this in the No Hide movement. I see it in, doing Jewish outreach where people sometimes say things, rely on things you shouldn't rely on, different things. They have to be called out. Because I get questions, oh, I heard this rabbi say like this. Well, they're wrong. That's easy. They're wrong. They shouldn't say it. But there are other opinions. Okay. Depends where, who you want to go like. Right? But again, a person can have great knowledge, but if it's not utilized right and it's skewed, what do I care? It doesn't really matter. And even if what they say is true, still can't listen to them because you don't know what's going to come out of their mouth. Right? So I would say that would pretty much finish up chapter 2, Mishnah 11. And I guess next week, we'll start with Mishnah 12 is not that much to say, but, we'll do that. We'll do that, I guess, next week.
Well, you just finished 9 and 10, right? So it will be chapter 2, Mishnah 11 next week.
12. I thought this was Mishnah 11. No?
No, it was part 11 of Mishnah 9.
Mishnah 10? You sure? Okay. Whatever it is. So it either be Mishnah 11 next week or Mishnah 12, depending on which one it is. You might be right. Let me just, I don't know. I got Mishnah 11 here, but you could be right. You could be right. In either case, this is part 11, and we are done. D-U-N.
Right on, right on. Hopefully,
D-O-N-E.
All enjoyed that.
So next week, I think we can go back to normal time, half hour earlier. I think we'll be able to squeeze it in, so we can go back at 2:00 instead of 2:30. But anyway, people should be happy. You should be ecstatic because it only took 11 times. It took 30 hours, 25 hours to go through one Mishnah. But next week you'll be even happier because next Mishnah we're going to hit pretty quick depending how I go through it. But anyway, that's a wrap.
All right, folks. So there you go. You heard it right from the rabbi. We are aiming for more Pirkei Avos next week, Hashem willing, and we'll be starting another new mitzvah. So
in the earlier time.
A Mishnah, another new Mishnah. Yeah, and we'll probably be a half hour earlier because it's a question of when the sun sets there in the land of Israel. Rabbi's got to make sure he observes his Shabbat properly, and
that means you're going to get less sleep. So you're going to get a half hour less sleep, so that's not good for you.
It's torturous, Rabbi. But it's worth it, right? It's Torah, and it's such a joy to learn it for sure. So, okay, folks, we're going to sign out for now, and we'll be back next week. Like the video. Feel free to share it on social media, folks. We want to see Rabbi Coffman's numbers head up, and so please like the video and share it on social media, and have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll see you all next week.